In yesterday's video, I talked about solving homelessness as a key component to solving the public health crisis, both of coronavirus and also the general public health crisis of mental illness and just general social ill. And this raised a discussion on Facebook about what solving homelessness means. And so what I'm putting forward is a notion of universal housing as a basic human right. Now, this seems a little bit foreign to our current understanding of the world, especially in the West, especially in like North America, where to have housing, you need to either own a house or pay someone who owns a house or an apartment in order to live in that space. But I'm proposing a change to that, a fundamental change to that. We as humans are the only species that actually has to work and pay to live, and for a place to live, for that matter. And I don't think that that's right. I think we should really live in a world where all humans, no matter how hard you work or what you do or who you are, has the fundamental right to having a place to live. Now, a great first step towards solving this problem would be to provide housing for the people that don't currently have it. Just simply give them homes. Now, this doesn't have to be elaborate. They don't need 12-room mansions or something like that. This can just be as simple as a living space, a sleeping space, a cooking space, and a bathroom space. Simple as that. Such an abode really doesn't cost all that much to build. If it's a freestanding structure, maybe $10,000, maybe $20,000 if you want a really nice one. There's been some pretty impressive designs put out there where you can use an old shipping container, or you can just cobble it together with wood and whatever materials happen to be available. In terms of a larger structure, yeah, you can just build some apartment buildings. The worst case scenario would be Soviet-style utilitarian brutalist apartment blocks. They're a little depressing looking, sure, yeah, but it's at least the appearance of a home, someplace that you can live at the very least. Now, mind you, there are some social problems that go along with this. You could end up in a situation where people are trapped in an even worse social situation than they would be if they were homeless. It's kind of hard to believe, but some of the cultures of social housing in that respect can get a little toxic. So some special care would have to be paid in order to prevent it from going toxic and to ensure the well-being of the people that end up there. And for that matter, it has the potential of rendering the people that live in such an environment as second-class citizens, even still. They won't have escaped the shame and poverty and hopelessness of being homeless. Merely they will have that same shame and poverty and hopelessness in socialized housing. So we want to avoid that in some way or shape or form. My solution to that would be not making it a special project, not making it just something special that you do for the poors or those without homes. Do it for everyone. Make housing a universal human right. This has several subtle but noticeable effects. For one, the social housing isn't going to be built in terms of lowest possible cost, lowest possible quality. If everyone is expected to get at least this quality of housing, then it should be built in such a way and maintained in such a way as any person should and could and would want to live there. In a society where universal public housing is a human right, is a normal part of society, then if all people or many people were perfectly okay with living in that sort of situation, I would call that an absolute win. If nobody was really even striving for much more than what that basic minimum was, then it's a sign that you're doing this project right. It's a sign that you've constructed public housing, social housing that isn't bleak, it isn't depressing, that isn't demeaning and demoralizing to live in, but rather something to be proud of. And this is what having a home that you can call your own really does for people. It provides a sense of agency and a sense of place and a sense of ownership over your space. Something that you can customize. You can put stuff on the walls. You can have a pet if you want to. You can record YouTube videos on the internet. Basically, it changes one's world from being just moving along constantly to being in a place, at a time, in a space, where you can actually feel like yourself, to surround yourself with things that make you, you. The pragmatic and cost-conscious among you might be thinking, well, what do we do if someone doesn't stabilize if we give them housing? What do we do if they're abusing alcohol or drugs, or there's behavioral issues, or they're just simply not getting on board as they're living in the social housing? What do we do if the program isn't working for someone? Well, I don't really think we have to do anything. If this is about universal public housing rather than housing with a catch, as in some special program that just the poors have, then there's no qualifications, or really there ought to be no qualifications for actually qualifying or residing in a home like this. It should be something that anybody, no matter what your state of mind or your state of body or state of behavior, should have access to. And yes, of course, there will be problems. There will be issues of criminality, issues of behavioral issues that are disturbing to neighbors, things like that. But I don't think that there needs to be a institutionalized policy with punitive consequences for these sorts of problems. More like it ought to be handled as the public health crisis that it actually is. If someone is living in this public socialized housing and addicted to drugs that make them a danger to their neighbors, rather than simply kicking them out, putting them back on the street, which probably will just feed that addiction and feed the mental health crisis that causes those behaviors, simply deal with the issue. An army of social workers needs to be involved in a project like this. And really, an army of social workers is necessary for our society to heal from the state that it's currently in. There's a lot of potential just in working with people, just in helping people heal, helping them become better people. And I think just getting them into a home will solve most of the barrier for most people that are experiencing issues like these. I know, this sounds wildly optimistic, and it sounds unrealistic to someone who is in this society, in this framework for thinking about the problem. But these sorts of critiques, these sorts of attitudes towards a project of this scale and a change to society of this scale are being made from the logic of the taken for granted of the present. In the current world, where it's just assumed that you have to pay for housing and assumed that the people that are unhoused right now are either too lazy or too stupid or any of those other scapegoat reasons that might have homeless people blamed for their own plight. These things, they're not real. These are illusions. These are illusions of a system that hierarchizes people, places the rich people above the poor people. This is the attitudes of a competitive society, one that is constantly coercing you into more productivity, which is to say more making money for the elites, the wealthy, which is supposed to trickle down but doesn't actually. These attitudes are built into the ideology that underlies our very existence. We learn them in school. We learn them from literature. We learn them from the policy speak of politicians and from the media. There's propaganda poisoning your mind with this punitive, awful, dehumanizing way of looking at people, to see the poor as a different species, as a different kind of person. But we're all the same. We're all part of this human race, and we all deserve the right to health and happiness and a place to be and a reasonably acceptable quality of life. I wish we lived in a world that matched that. Anyway, hopefully we can move towards that. Just a quick video today again. I do this every day, so if you enjoy my content, come back tomorrow, subscribe to the channel so you can keep up to date, and hit the like button if you would. and share it with anybody that might be interested in these kinds of discussions. And if you have any questions or you want to engage in the discussion, definitely contact me. Send me a comment on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, because this topic came from a comment from somebody that watched my last video. And so if you have something that you're interested in, you want to talk about it, I'd love to hear from you. So any comments, constructive criticisms, anything. See you tomorrow.